our paper about the influence of data storytelling on the ability to recall information. So data visualization techniques have been around for decades, and they help us distill complex data into meaningful and memorable and engaging insights. And data storytelling is a relatively new sort of subtype of data visualization, where traditional data visualization is combined with a narrative. So on top of this baseline visualization, the reader's attention is directed towards certain elements and a narrative about these elements is added. Now, the assumption here is that including this narrative makes it easier to tap into the emotional and decision-making areas of the brain rather than just presenting facts and numbers. The question is, does this work? Now, there's been a lot of related work on the relative benefits of data storytelling, but the results are a bit sort of mixed. If you look at the effect of data storytelling on engagement, there's mixed results. If you look at whether data storytelling can increase the empathy towards the subjects that information is being visualized about, there's also no effect, according to 2 different studies. And in terms of what people remember from a data storytelling visualization versus a traditional one, the results are also a bit muddled. The one study done about this shows no effects on short-term recall, but that data storytelling does perform better in terms of long-term recall. But despite this lack of empirical evidence, in the community you still sort of see this assumption that data storytelling is able to increase memorability and engagement. Now, in our work, we take a closer look at how data storytelling influences recall. So our contributions are first a framework of data storytelling principles, which we compare to traditional data visualization with concrete actions for every principle. This is something you can read about in the paper. What I'm going to focus on in this presentation is our controlled experiment to compare these 2 types of visualizations in terms of their effects on short-term and long-term recall. Now, how do we do this? We designed an online controlled experiment with a between group design, because we also figure that if you show people the same sort of visualization in 2 different variants about the same topic, then there's going to be a massive learning effect. You will remember stuff from the first variant that you will carry on to the next one. Our independent variable is the visualization paradigm, so traditional data visualizations versus data storytelling visualizations, and our dependent variables are short-term and long-term recall. Now let's go to the different stages of our experiment. It starts with a pre-experiment questionnaire where, in addition to demographics, we ask some questions about their prior knowledge about the 3 visualization topics. Then people are randomly assigned to one of these 2 conditions, and then inside a condition they are shown 3 different visualization tasks in random order. And after being shown a visualization, then they are given a post-task test with 4 questions to test short-term recall. So 12 questions in total. And then 1 week later, they are sent a link to a new questionnaire with another 12 questions, 4 per visualization task, to test long-term recall. And we used the same questions but then paraphrased them so we could compare it better, but so that we could also avoid people recognizing the exact question and the exact answer that they picked last time. Where do we get our visualizations from? Well, like I said, we had 3 different tasks, and we developed a regular data visualization and a data storytelling variant for each. So they provide the same information, but the data storytelling one is a narrative modification of this baseline visualization. And we picked underlying data sets in such a way that we thought the general public wouldn't be likely to have a lot of prior knowledge about them. So they weren't super popular topics. To avoid introducing bias, right? If you pick something that everyone knows about, it becomes really hard to tease apart, to separate prior knowledge from what they acquire by studying the visualization. You can look in the paper for more details about these visualizations, right? But the first one was about men's voices in pop music, where the underlying chart was a combination of a line diagram and a scatter plot. We had task 2 about unsolved US homicides, a combination of a map and a circular area diagram, and the costs of a night out, of party nights and date nights, which was a grouped bar chart. And you can see for each of them that we've highlighted certain elements and added a narrative in the versions on the right, the data storytelling visualizations. In terms of participants, we used Prolific to conduct our purpose of sampling. More details are in the paper, but we have 94 participants in total, which were fairly equally distributed. So let's look at the results of this. Well, if we look at all of the 3 tasks combined, then there were no significant differences between data storytelling and data visualization, even though data storytelling seemed to perform a bit better on recall. If you look at the individual ones, then there are some differences here. So men's voices and pop music, there was no significant difference, and the same for the homicide one. But for Cost of a Night Out, there were significant differences. Data storytelling produced higher recall than the traditional visualization. If you look at the drop in terms of short-term versus long-term recall, we saw that there were significant differences for all of the different visualizations, and also for all of them combined. So there was a significant drop-off in recall even after a week. What we also looked at is this drop-off bigger for data storytelling, for instance, or smaller than for the traditional data visualization? Now, in all of these cases, the drop-off for data storytelling was smaller than for the traditional data visualizations, but these differences were not statistically significant. So that means that there still is no conclusive evidence of the effect of data storytelling on short-term or long-term recall. Yes, data storytelling scored better, but this was not always significant, and the drop-off over time might have been smaller for data storytelling, but it's not significant either. What we did find is that the chart type appears to have a moderating influence on recall. And we know from previous work by Heer and Bostock that different chart types can incur a different cognitive load. For instance, bar charts are easier to decode than line charts, and line charts are easier to do than circular diagrams. So our hypothesis here is that the chart type here, it has something to do with the cognitive load. This lines up with our charts as well. The Cost of a Night Out was easier to do than Men's Voices, which was easier to do than US Homicides. And we suspect that the narrative elements might increase the cognitive load. So then a data storytelling might only be beneficial if the underlying visualization has a lower cognitive load, because these two are added together. Of course, you can also argue the other direction, right, that these narrative elements are supposed to reduce the cognitive load. What we also don't know is what role personal relevance or interest plays in the topic. If I'm really interested in a topic, I might remember more about it and recall might be higher. So for future work, we'd like to do new experiments with more and more different chart types to test this cognitive load hypothesis. And we'd like to look at the motivation for participation. In addition to prior knowledge, also maybe ask about prior interest in a particular topic. And finally, we only looked at a specific style of data storytelling, this martini glass structure where we sort of funnel people through. But there's also other ones like interactive visualization. So it would also be nice to see whether that has an influence on this. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions in the Q&A session.